You need my contact info. If you need my contact info, it's on the screen. And then if you need it at the end, if we move on too quickly here, you can I'll put it in the chat for you guys later. Let's see. There we go. Everyone see the next slide? I hope so. Okay. All right. So a little bit about Houston Audubon before I dive in. Houston Audubon is a bird conservation organization. We're a smaller chapter. We're a local chapter of the larger National Audubon Society. National Audubon kind of oversees everything at the national level, as the name suggests. And then there are state level chapters. So there's Texas Audubon, for example, and then we fall into the local chapters category. And what sets us apart from a lot of the other local chapters, like for example, Seattle Audubon or New York Audubon or whatever it is, Mobile Alabama Audubon or is it Mobile Audubon? They have an Audubon. What sets us apart from some of these other local chapters is we do land conservation. So we're one of the few chapters that owns and manages land for the conservation of birds. We own about 5,000 acres, more or less, across the greater Houston, Galveston area. Our properties range from the Piney Woods up in the north. Our northernmost property is Winners Bayou. It's in the Sam Houston National Forest, which is a lot of beautiful longleaf pine. Actually, it's mostly loblolly pine forest. And then all the way south down to southwest down to Dos Vacas, which is kind of a coastal wetland, coastal salt flat habitat. Up east towards Louisiana, we have our High Island properties, which is where I am now. These are properties that we call like migrant traps. A lot of birds migrating across the Gulf land there to kind of refuel and fill up on insects and bugs or insects and berries and things before heading north. So, and then there's properties in between in the city uh, and we have some properties, like some island properties that we manage too. So that's kind of what sets us apart from a lot of these other properties. And we do, in addition to the land management, we do quite a bit of advocacy and outreach as well. So we work in the city to get people to encourage people to plant native plants. We work with the government to promote climate friendly policy or bird friendly policy, these kinds of things. So that's a little bit about Houston Audubon. What I do with the organization, I've worked here for 3 years. I'm going on my fourth, and I've worn a lot of different hats here. In my first year, I was hired under the conservation science team, and we did a lot of bird banding, bird monitoring, population monitoring, a lot of surveying, things like that. In my second year here, I've done a lot more of the land management. I was moved under the land team. And so that involves pulling invasive species, planting plants, doing habitat restoration, picking up trash, building boardwalks, this sort of thing. And then in my third year, we did a lot of, this last year, we've been working on a lot of the community work. And it's been creating bird habitat in urban areas. So getting homeowners, libraries, schools, businesses, you name it, to install bird habitat. And then this next year, I'm moving positions again. We'll be working on the Firebird project, which is a University of Illinois project to look at how black rails, a small little marsh water bird, how they're using their habitat along the Gulf Coast. So a lot of different hats here at Houston Audubon. That's the nature of a nonprofit. All right, let's dive into climate change and birds. This first slide is a bit of, preaching to the choir. I think you all know what climate is, probably, given that you're the climate group. I just copied and pasted Noah's definition. Climate is the long-term average of temperature, precipitation, and weather variables at a given location. I think when I try to talk about climate change with some of the people we do advocacy with or outreach, I always try to remember to tell people about that keyword long term. long term. Climate is long term. It's not, oh, we had a hurricane. It must be climate change. Or, oh, there's a snow day. There's no such thing as global warming. It's the long term. And I try to reinforce that when I go out into the world and talk to people. So how does this long-term change influence birds? Well, I really like this quote from a very famous ecologist. It says, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." So, what he means by this is climate changes naturally over time, over long periods of time, though, right? Like tens, hundreds of thousands of years. It's not climate change as we see it now, which is the rapid change, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's the long-term slow change that happens over tens of thousands of years, and this puts evolutionary pressure on birds to adapt to their environment. So take this warbler, for example. This is a Blackburnian warbler. They're arriving right now as we speak on the Upper Texas coast. If you want to come down to High Island in Texas and see them, this is the best place to do it before they migrate further north into the Northeast. Um, but how did climate influence these birds? Well, millions of years ago, before uh, the last glacial maximum, these birds were not migratory. They were in situ. And as the Earth started to cool, the glaciers started to form, and winters became more harsh. Resources disappeared, and they had to disperse. This is, by the way, this is the leading hypothesis for why birds migrate. There are many hypotheses for why birds migrate. This is the leading theory, or excuse me, the leading hypothesis. And so as these resources disappeared, as the temperature cooled, birds began to shift their ranges, and over time, we believe they started following the resources. They would go south in the winter and spend their winters in warmer tropical climates. Then they'd go back north when the temperature warmed and there was more food availability. And so those pressures put evolutionary changes on our birds, which in turn adapt to those climatic conditions. Um, so that's just one of many, many, many examples of how climate influences birds. And of course, now these birds are in this seasonal cycle of migration. And not all birds migrate, but these guys do. And they're adapted to this climactic cycle, this seasonal change. They migrate north in the spring, south in the fall, and that's their relationship with climate. One of many examples. So, so how does climate change affect these relationships to birds and their climate? Well, if climate change is the rapid change in the long-term average temperature, precipitation, et cetera, and birds are adapted to these long-term precipitation, temperature, et cetera, climatic conditions, then a rapid change in it will produce a number of issues for birds that are very closely synced up with them. So a few of these examples include phenological mismatch, and I'll go into depth on each of these here in a minute. Phenological or phenological mismatch, skipping breeding seasons, range shifts, and of course, more extreme weather, more frequent extreme weather, which we've all had the joy of experiencing all over this country, whether you're in the Midwest or the East Coast and have had terrible freezes more frequently, or down here on the Gulf Coast where we're seeing a million hurricanes a year now. So let's dive into some of these and how they relate to birds. So phenological mismatch. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these birds are attuned to they've literally evolutionarily adapted to our seasonal changes, right? They come north for space, for food, when it gets warm up here and there's food availability, and they go south in the winter when food is scarce in the north and their chicks have fledged and there's more food in the south, essentially in the tropics, right? And similarly with Arctic breeding shorebirds, it's really not too different. But also Arctic shorebirds can escape predation of their chicks in the north. If you've ever been up to the Arctic, there's a lot fewer predators in the Arctic Circle than there are on the mainland USA that would eat a lovely little shorebird's egg. So this shorebird here in the picture is a red knot. They're well known for having some of the greatest migrations of all birds. They fly, something like 8 to 10,000 miles in a single migration. They'll fly from Tierra del Fuego all the way in the south of South America, all the way up north to the Arctic to breed. And when they land in the Arctic, they're breeding there because there's not a lot of predators to eat their eggs. But what's starting to happen is that as the glaciers melt in the north and the Arctic, um, we're seeing a lot more fresh water appear up there, which means more snowfall and more precipitation events, creating, ironically, colder weather on their breeding grounds. So when they're arriving in the north, expecting to lay their eggs in a relatively warm environment, and I say relative because it's still bloody cold up there, but warmer for them, and it's actually cold, then their chicks can't survive that cold. The eggs will just die, and they will end up mismatching their entire breeding season. Um, so that's one tragic example. Another example is with Carolina and black-capped chickadees. Carolina and black-capped chickadees I just put a picture of a Carolina chickadee because they almost look the exact same. I heard there are a couple people on this call from who are in Michigan or Minnesota or one of the Midwest states up there, the Great Lakes states. You've got the black-capped chickadees. They're a little bit bigger, but they look almost the same. And then down here in the South, we have the Carolina chickadees. And they're these little birds, teeny tiny birds with black caps, a black chin, and a peachy gray kind of color on their bodies. And they're separated by climactic conditions. In fact, the mountains have really nothing to do with their separation. So you might think, well, maybe it's the Appalachian Range that separates them, but really, truly, it's just the climactic conditions of the North and South. In fact, for a very long time, the northern parts of the US only saw black-capped chickadees, but now we're starting to see more and more Carolina chickadees. And because of this, they're starting to hybridize more. And if you're a biologist or you've ever taken a biology class, you think to yourself, well, isn't more genetic diversity in a population healthier for wildlife? And that's generally true within a species, but among different species, hybrids don't produce viable young very often. And so as these ranges start to overlap, especially as the Carolina chickadee starts to move further and further north as the climate warms, these black-capped chickadees are, one, either breeding with the Carolina chickadees and not being able to pass on their genes that help them survive in these conditions, or two, they're being outcompeted by Carolina chickadees that can survive in warmer environments. So what we're seeing is a drastic decline in black-capped chickadee populations. So the top map here is the trends of black-capped chickadees. Blue dots represent a increase in the populations of black-capped chickadee, and the red dots represent a decline. And where the decline is strongest, you can see on the bottom map, the increase in the range of the Carolina chickadee is pressing further northward. Funny enough, the trends for the Carolina chickadee is simply that they're decreasing too, because unfortunately all birds are decreasing with habitat loss, but their ranges are increasing. So it's a tremendous problem for the black-capped chickadee. Another effect that I brought up earlier was skipping breeding seasons. So climate change causes a lot of birds to skip their breeding seasons altogether. I mentioned some of those Arctic birds earlier. So this is the least tern. It's a tern that again has like the red knot I discussed, it has a great migration pattern. It travels thousands and thousands of miles. It's a really cool bird. Um, but if it gets to its breeding ground, I'll put it to this way. These birds have 6 weeks to migrate, get to the north, lay their eggs, raise their young, and get back to the south. 6 weeks. That's an incredible, that's like, imagine running a 4 minute mile like for 4 days straight. It's something like that. That's what these birds do. It's incredible. Um, but if they get up there and it's too cold, they will simply just turn around. They won't even try and lay eggs because it's not worth the energy output the energy output that it takes to have babies. On the right here, we have some of these warblers. I mentioned the black Burnian warbler earlier, but here we have prothonotary and yellow-throated warblers. Um, like the black Burnian, they'll run into trouble with whatever what was I talking about earlier? With food, missing out on with phenological differences, with phenological mismatch. But they'll also skip their entire breeding season if there's just not resources to feed them. So if they arrive in an area and there's no food, like no berries have produced yet, or they've missed the berry season entirely because we're having these extreme weather patterns, then they will just completely skip their breeding season. Another effect of climate change on our birds is range shifts. Range shifts. So a lot of birds, actually all birds, have evolved a range that they exist in. So what I have here is an example of snow geese. Snow geese are a bird that is seeing a range expansion. If you read the summary of today's presentation, you read that there are some birds that at first glance, it appears that climate change would help them. And the range expansion may appear like it's helping these birds, but actually in the long run, it is detrimental to these birds. And the reason is because they're short stopping their breeding patterns. And so let me take a step back here and explain all of this. So it's warmer in the snow goose's wintering or summer grounds where they breed, so they stick around for a longer breeding season. But if their range is also expanding, then they can go further north or further south to lay their eggs. Now, if they're coming from the south and going north to lay their eggs, and then they only stop at the southernmost part of their range, then that's called short stopping, and the chicks aren't adapted to those environments, and the chicks end up dying. So range shifts, this can appear to be a helpful thing at first. We talk about like white-winged doves, right? White-winged doves weren't even part of the environment, weren't even part of the bird composition in the US for a very long time. We didn't see white-winged doves. They're native to Mexico. But as the climate warms, they slowly begin to expand their ranges throughout the cities, and they've outcompeted other native birds in the area. And it's kind of worked out for the white-winged doves a little bit, but it hasn't worked out for a lot of our native doves. So I'll also just add a caveat that white-winged doves have also been expanding because of nut trees. We plant a lot of nut trees in our cities now, pecans and things, and this has helped them move north too. It's not just climate change, but um, and then, of course, probably like the most obvious effect of climate change on our birds is more frequent extreme weather events. So, again, this isn't, oh no, we had a hurricane. It must be climate change. This is, oh no, we've had 6 hurricanes this season for the past 5 years or 30 years. It's that unusual increase in these weather patterns. And this really impacts wildlife, especially birds. Songbirds, for example, let's take the Houston area, for example. The more and more of these hurricane and salt inundated weather events where we have salt water coming up, storm surges, hurricanes, whatever it is, bringing salt water into the mainland. It's completely killing all of the fruit trees that they rely on. It's killing the insects that they rely on. So when they get here, there's no food for them. And we see this more and more. And just over time, their populations are just, it's another thing that's helping reduce their populations. With hawks and owls, it's a very similar situation, except that it's the rodents that are no longer available for them to eat. So either they will get up and leave, they will abandon their, their feeding area, their what we call their home range. For raptors, they have a home range that they feed and breed in, and if there's no food, they will leave or they will simply die because they can't survive anywhere else. Every animal is adapted to live in a specific environment. Um, so if there's no rodents because of these hurricane events or flooding events or whatever it is, then they will just simply perish. With hummingbirds, it's a little bit more of a sad story. I mean, they're all sad stories, but this one's really sad. They'll be migrating across the Gulf or wherever, and if there's more and more hurricanes, if you didn't know, storms in the Gulf of Mexico will just drop birds dead right into the Gulf. Like they can't fly through a storm. They don't have the ability. They're fragile, tiny little creatures, especially hummingbirds. So if there's one hurricane, one hurricane a year or one hurricane every other year, her hummingbirds will probably be okay. They'll make it through and they'll repopulate. If there's like 10 hurricanes occurring more frequently and just more and more and more hurricanes every year, these hummingbirds are just dying and dying and dying, becoming shark chicken nuggets. Um, and they're not able to repopulate. So it's just again more contribution to the loss of their populations. And then another really sad one is the beach nesters. The beach nesters, such as those least terns I mentioned earlier. Some beach nesters stick around in the upper Texas coast, or on the East Coast, for example. And this could include shorebirds like plovers, sandpipers, terns, gulls. Um, and what'll happen is they'll lay their eggs directly on the beach, directly on the sand, because that's what they've evolved to do. It's what they've done for millions of years. And as the tides continue to get higher, as the sea level continues to rise, their nests will just be washed away. They can't do anything about it. They're just laying their eggs where their genes essentially make them function to do so. And it's unfortunate. But then obviously, if there's more hurricanes, less nests as well every year. So that's a lot of doom and gloom, but there are things we can do to help. Houston Audubon, we do a lot for birds. We can't stop climate change as one organization, but what we can do is help birds where it matters most. We can look at what we can do, and we'll put our efforts into that. So I mentioned at the beginning of the slide, we're known for our land conservation. So we give birds what they need. Here in High Island, we have what's called a rookery. A rookery is just simply a gathering place for birds to breed, raise their young, and have their young fledge. So these two birds on the screen are roseate spoonbills. They're a rookery nester here in the Upper Texas coast, and normally out on the rookery islands in the Gulf or out in the coastal marsh, there, as sea levels rise and storms are more rapid, they don't have as much protection from the water, and they lose their nests. Not to mention, there's so much housing developments down here that it's really hard for them to find nesting areas anymore. But what we do is we build artificial rookeries for them out in higher elevation areas. We'll build up big mounds of dirt and oyster mounds and grow these trees on them that they can nest in and raise their young. So that's one example of effective land conservation. We've seen these birds' numbers rebound in the last 10 years. We're seeing thousands and thousands of nests, among other species that use rookeries as well, like great egrets, snowy egrets, neotropic cormorants, etc. Another thing we do is we do a lot of advocacy work, including we attend an advocacy day with both the Land Conservation Alliance and the National Audubon Society. We'll go to the US Capitol and the Texas Capitol to talk to staffers and even occasionally an actual politician. It's a lot harder to get the chance to talk with the actual politician, but sometimes we do. But we do get a chance to talk to the staffers a lot. And, those conversations can be tricky, but I think as long as you have the research in your hands, um, it can be very effective. Sometimes you'll watch their face kind of light up and be like, wow, I didn't know this was really a thing. But when you have it on a piece of paper for them, you can be surprised with how much you can put into somebody's brain. And then we do a lot of outreach too. We talk about the effects of climate change to community members, to community groups. We do stuff like this. So what I'm doing now, we talk to people about how climate change affects birds. And I think the more awareness we give, the better. Um, so what can you all do to help birds in a rapidly changing climate? Well, you can go birding. And I know that sounds like, how does that help with climate change? Well, I'll explain in a minute. You can plant natives. Native plants help cool an environment down. Here in Houston, Galveston area, we have found that in certain parts of town, especially places where there's an environmental injustice, like there's not a lot of green space, uh, temperatures are 10 degrees warmer on average than in areas where, there are green spaces, usually in ritzier areas. And so what Houston Audubon does is we encourage communities to plant native plants. We provide native plants. We have a natives nursery. We give out native plants for free to some of these communities to create green spaces. And then we sell them to community members. So look to your local native plant societies, your native Audubon chapters, your native nature society groups, and see if they have a native plant nursery and plant natives. Not only will it cool down your space, but it'll also provide birds food, shelter when they're already struggling in a changing climate, right? We want to give them the best shot possible. And the planting native plants is the best way to help birds. Connect with others. Tell everybody about the native plants you plant. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your family. Connecting with others there's a reason our country is so divided right now. It's because Facebook makes it so easy for people to connect with each other and voice their differences in opinion. So share on Facebook how awesome native plant gardening is and how it helps birds and climate, dealing with climate change. And of course, get out and vote for alternative sources of energy. Here in Texas, I know we're like the big oil tycoon state, but actually, if you didn't know, a lot of us, myself included, get 100% of our energy from wind power. And if you think wind is bad for birds, get it out of your head. It's not. Wind energy is not bad for birds. There are way worse things for birds than a windmill. I promise you. Um, so get out and vote, and let's talk about the birding. So how does birding help in a changing climate? If climate change is happening, we need massive, massive, massive data sets to know how to best help birds and where they need the most help. Where can we prioritize our habitat restoration? Where can we prioritize, building up reinforcements along the beach where saltwater levels, sea level rise is inundating bird eggs? We need this data. I'm one person in an Audubon chapter with a staff of 15 people, and between myself, I'm the only biologist on staff besides my buddy Wyatt over there. Like we're the only two biologists on a staff of 20 uh, in a huge, huge, huge area. We don't have time to go out and sample, 3,000 data points 60 times to get bird data. But this app, eBird, it's a community science project where you count the number of birds you see and how many species when you go out birding. And it's a very basic, very intuitive app. You just click start checklist, you click the little plus arrow next to all the birds you see. and it keeps track of that for you. It sends your data to Cornell, and that becomes accessible to people like me who use it to monitor birds and do conservation. On top of that, it gives you a life list, which will tell you all the birds you've ever seen, and you can even do it by county. People get really into this. It's a very competitive thing, birding. It can be a lot of fun to do. You can have a county list, a county list, a state list, your life list, etc. So check out eBird. It's a ton of fun and it helps biologists. Another little bit of bird technology that helps birds during, who are dealing with climate change is Birdcast. Birdcast is a radar technology that is leveraged to predict and track birds migrating through an area. So you can watch in real time birds coming over the Gulf of Mexico and see where they're landing. You can get predictions of where birds are going to go. So the 29th, so tonight, we're supposed to get 65 million birds coming across the Gulf of Mexico. That's a fairly big number of birds. In mid-April, that number will probably jump up to about 300 million birds. 300 million birds coming across the Gulf of Mexico. So it's really exciting to watch that happen. You can get out and go birding when it says it's like peak migration, count all those birds, and help, collect that data for biologists. But what this also does, if birds are migrating over the Gulf of Mexico, oh, sorry, I thought I heard somebody. If birds are migrating over the Gulf of Mexico en masse, then this gives you an idea of when, and you can go turn your lights out at night because light pollution confuses birds when they're migrating at night, draws them down to cities like flies, and they collide. And that's a big reason for the loss of birds is bird collisions due to light pollution. So turn your lights out at night if you see birds coming in over the Gulf of Mexico. That'll help hugely as the climate changes. Birds are going to have a better shot at survival. All right, so to recap here, the presentation, we talked about climate, what it is, the long-term pattern of temperature, precipitation, weather events, etc. Talked about the influences of birds and climate, how it influences their evolution, and those adaptations tie the bird to that climate. We talked about how climate change affects birds. We talked about phenological mismatch, extreme weather, food availability, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked about how to help. Vote, get out and vote, plant native plants. Again, they provide the food birds need as we continue to develop housing and Waterburgers and Walmarts on their habitats. Um, you could be the one helping birds in the place of, the wetland mitigation that isn't working where they built the Walmart. And then spread the word. Get out and tell people about this on Facebook or whatever social media platform you use, or tell your neighbors, tell them at Thanksgiving. Be the annoying Uncle Joe with, all the information to tell everybody. Um, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I just wanted to end on a quote. I think climate change is a pretty daunting subject. Nobody really knows what to do for sure to stop it. We're all using technology that uses, tons and tons and tons of coal and oil and gas, and now there's the AI data centers. My God, like it feels like it's never going to be a solved problem. But I wanted to end on this quote that maybe gives us a little hope, and it's from E.O. Wilson, one of the greatest conservation minds of our time, and it's, "You are capable of more than you know. Choose a goal that seems right for you and strive to be the best, however hard the path. Aim high, behave honorably, prepare to be alone at times and to endure failure. Persist. The world needs all you can give." So, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And then my contact info is there. You can email me at sbrown@houstonaudubon.org.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Schyler. So, we're going to just open it up, but usually the best way to do this in an organized manner is to raise your hand and then I'll just call on you in order. So I see that Bill and Kathy have a question there first.
Yeah, after I unmute. Yeah, great talk, Schyler. Thanks for sharing this. You say that we don't know what to do about addressing climate change, but are you familiar with Citizens Climate and what we're trying to do to address climate change?
I'm not too familiar with you guys. I did a little bit of research before this, but not enough to get the full picture.
So our solution is carbon pricing, and that's what we're all about to address climate change in a bipartisan way. But we appreciate your information, and one of the things that I most appreciated was your comment on wind turbines and not being so detrimental to birds. And there's a huge part of our society who wants to push back on wind energy with the bird argument. And I think the Audubon Society has put out good information on saying that's not really the problem. And in the big picture, clean energy is better for birds than the negative impact of a few impacts on birds. And I think that's a tool both for CCL to use that information, but also the more the Audubon Society, which is obviously a respected platform for bird information, can share that, the better off we are.
For sure. Yeah, they found some really great solutions to the few. I won't pretend there aren't collisions with wind turbines with birds, but you're right. It's not as big a problem as people think, and there are great ways to mitigate it from painting the blades. The birds, they've seen almost 100% reduction in mortality upon just painting the blades of the wind turbines. But additionally, just smart wind turbine placement, like maybe just don't put them right in the path where we know like certain species migrate through. It's very simple stuff. So, and you're right, the long-term effects of climate change are going to be way more detrimental to the, a few mortalities caused by wind energy. So
Thanks.
Color are they painting the blades to make them more visible?
I believe it's just black. I think they're just painting the blades black.
Huh.
But
Huh.
this isn't something I think they're doing in production yet. This was a study somebody published. I don't remember what university, but maybe Texas Tech or something did it.
Huh.
Okay.
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 Thanks.
Okay. Jim?
Yes, thanks for your clearly illustrated presentation. Just a detailed question, because you might know. What is the timing of the hummingbird migrations through this area? Thank you.
Are you in the greater Houston Galveston area?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Okay, so I just got my first hummingbirds yesterday. I saw a few this morning at my feeders, so they are arriving right now. And then they'll keep pushing north, and then come fall they'll be going back through between September and October.
Okay.
Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering how birds, if we have non-native species that get into our environment and they compete for resources with migrating birds or native birds. A few years ago in the Houston Chronicle here, we had a picture in a article about pet parakeets that were either released or escaped from their cages, and there's a picture of a power transmission tower that was filled with parakeets, and I was just wondering how that affects native birds, if you birds out
Great
there.
question. Great question. Yeah, monk parakeets are a very interesting bird to see in the Houston area. among others, like the scaly-breasted munias, or some of you might know them as like the spice finches. The little, they're like the really scaly-breasted, small finch-looking birds. Those are from India. So yeah, a lot of these non-native invasive birds are, they're usually released as you mentioned as house pets, but others like there's a clam or some invertebrate that was is causing havoc on like in lakes. It's filtering too many nutrients. The lakes are spread by boats. I can't remember right now. Zebra mussels. So sometimes these things are spread via like marine life or marine industry practices and stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, a lot of the times what'll happen is you'll take a bird like our Native American kestrel, right? Our American kestrel. It's the smallest North American falcon. They're really, really tiny. The males will weigh as little as like 20 grams, maybe less, like 15 grams. Tiny little falcon that goes in and feeds on grasshoppers and small mice and things like this. And they nest in cavities. They nest in tree cavities dug out by other birds like woodpeckers. So we call them secondary cavity nesters. They're not the ones creating it, like woodpeckers are secondary cavity nesters. Well, when a bird like a European starling comes into the picture, the European starling was released by the Shakespearean Society back in the 1700s when a really cool dude who really liked Shakespeare wanted the US to look like Shakespearean times. And he brought all the wildlife in Shakespeare to the US and released it. That was a great idea. And those European starlings love to nest in cavities. And so what we see a lot is our cavity nesters, like the American kestrel, are fighting for cavities to nest in against non-native species like the European starling, which doesn't have any predation pressure from raptors in the US. I mean, there are some raptors that are, eating them, but for the most part, like it'd be like if you went to a foreign country and saw a piece of fruit that you've never seen before and you're not sure you can eat it. That's what it's like for a raptor looking at a European starling. It doesn't know it can eat it. So there's no pressure on these birds from other predators. So they can just take over all these nesting habitats. And then the European or the American kestrel, the bluebird, all these other cavity nesters have nowhere to nest, right? So that's one example of how those non-native birds really can impact our native wildlife.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Schyler.
Yeah. Stuart?
Yeah, Schyler, thank you for the presentation. Um, I want to thank you for using the word hypothesis. It's really, so I'm a retired professor of geoscience, and it always drives me crazy when I see the use of theory when what they mean is hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aside from that, uh, is there research being done on the uh, genetic alteration that takes place as a result of these climatic changes and the influences on migration patterns, etc.? And what do they
There
show?
are, there are. And I couldn't, I couldn't give a citation off the top of my head, but I can anecdotally say, I've seen some papers out there about, I mean, what it boils down to is our climate is changing too rapidly for wildlife to adapt to, right? So let's go back to, you know, I hate saying it, but survival of the fittest. If if a bird survives an event and passes on those genes, then those genes will help it survive the next time that happens, right? But if that event happens too rapidly for a population, aka climate change, then that bird can't, there's no genes existing in the population that can be passed on at a rate that is suitable for that population to grow, if that makes sense. And that's what the research is showing. Like there's no way for birds to adapt to a climate that is changing this rapidly. There are birds that are taking advantage of certain situations. Again, the snow geese, right? Their range is expanding. They're taking advantage of this warmer northern climate, but in the long run, it's just detrimental to them because their chicks can't adapt to this new environment and they just perish. So um, that's my answer to that. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thanks. And before Roger jumps in, my very first CCL lobbying in Washington, D.C. coincided with National Audubon being there because they
Oh.
were having a lobby fly in as well. And it was interesting if we had visited an office after Audubon had been there, because it's kind of like a 1-2 punch about the same topic. And it really made an impression on some of those offices. So maybe it's something that needs to be coordinated more often.
It's a lot of fun. I think there are people out there who and in the in the White House and in the Texas House and who do care and they just truly don't understand. And there are some who just I've run into a few of the staffers who just turned us away blatantly or just, yep, nice to meet you. Have a great day. Like, but that is what it is. So yeah, we can be effective in our advocacy days. Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. But so your chapter, or the Texas chapter of the Audubon Society, doesn't rely on any government funding, right? It's just people like us, right?
Correct. I mean, we have projects that are government funded. So the project I'm about to start, the Firebird project, is government. It's a Restore Act grant from the oil spill. It'll be, we're waiting on funding from the government to disperse to start that. Similarly, we have a Bolivar Peninsula Nature Trail that we're really excited about. It's kind of a bunch of sites along the upper Texas coast that we're putting together into kind of this world-class birding sample destination thing. It's supposed to bring down tourism and all that, also government funded. But my position is funded by um, rich people. And so
Oh, so
that's
none
really
of
what it comes
us.
to. Sometimes I joke it's blood money, but I might get in trouble if I actually say that out loud. So
And as far as the property, are those things like they're just properties that people go birding at, or they're public? We can go see them, or do you try to keep people away, or what? How does that work?
yeah, 18 properties. Most of them have some form of public visitation. So the ones down here on High Island, we have Gas, Eubanks, Boy Scout Woods, and Smith Oaks. Those four are all available to the public. They have trail systems. You come down and you want to time it right. You want to get here when the birds are here, and it's totally publicly available. We also have some that are not publicly available. Just up the road, up the coast a little bit, maybe 5 miles from here, there's Mundy Marsh. It's upland Spartina habitat. So it's all tall grass coastal prairies, and we have a lot of rails that use that habitat. King rail, or excuse me, not king rail, clapper rail, black rail, and this is a not available to the public. And then we have some that are high, like we have the Bolivar Flats property down on further down the coast. It's you can walk the beach and view the shorebirds, but all the dunes and upland wetlands and all of that is birds only. Um, so yeah, just check our website for, public access. Feel free to call or email us. We'll tell you where to go, when to go, um, and if you see one of us down here and want to see a bird, let us know. We love to go birding. We like to show you guys around.
Yeah, and my final question, if no one else has their hand raised, is relates to hummingbirds. So I noticed that, and I've kept my feeders out some winters through the whole winter, and there are stragglers, right? Uh, that
Yes.
that just don't seem like they have the energy to cross the Gulf of Mexico anymore. Um, are they tend to be like older, they just maybe frail or something, or is it a good idea to leave feeders out through the wintertime?
That's a great question. So usually what you're seeing isn't technically stragglers. What you're seeing is actually different species. So our main species that we get here is the ruby-throated hummingbird. That's the big one that we get. We get tons of those through here. Um, if they die on their before their fall migration, they're probably just going to die inland and or they'll die. They will try and cross. They'll try and cross. There's no like, oh, I'm too old. I can't go for it. They will go for it. And then they will just simply die over the water if they can't make it. The birds you're seeing in the winter are some of our more like uh, incidental species is what we call them. So something you might see like an Anna's hummingbird or a buff-breasted hummingbird or something like this, some of these more rare species that tend to be accidentals or incidentals in the winter time. So whether or not it's a good idea to keep them up in the winter, we have staff members who think it's fine to, as long as you clean them out every week, replace the water, the sugar water, scrub the heck out of them with soapy water and rinse them real well. The worst thing you can do is leave it out and let it turn into honey mead, and get the birds. The birds don't want to have a party. They want to get fueled up and get out of here. So just clean out your hummingbird feeders, and you can leave them up year round. I don't do it. I take mine down in the winter. I don't see enough hummingbirds for it to matter to me. So maybe that's wrong of me. I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, obviously, so their birds are, I should know this. They're warm-blooded?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so they produce their own heat. Yes, they don't have to rely and fun fact, even reptiles produce their own heat on some scale. They do just rely on the sun more. But yes, birds do produce their own heat. Hummingbirds I think their body temperature is something like 105 or 107 degrees. It's incredible. They're like just at the threshold before their enzymes start breaking down in their body. So they definitely stay warm year round.
I
That's
was,
why they need so much food. That's why they're buzzing around all the time.
yeah, I actually have a picture of a hummingbird on a feeder with icicles on it. I mean, I was just shocked. I'm just shocked. But they're more hardy than you would think for being so tiny.
Yeah, they sure are.
Well, we're pretty much up with our time. Um, so what time is it now? Oh, wow, 4:59. This is perfect. Schyler, this has been great. Really, really certainly do appreciate it. And if I could just plug a couple of things, let me get these back up here. Just for information, our next meeting will be a month from now, obviously. It'll be Saturday, April 28th. We just had a speaker drop off, but then I thank the steward. We have Tiffany Bradfield, who's a new San Antonio volunteer. She's going to talk about artificial intelligence. Um, and she asked me in a response, she was going to attend today. I didn't see her. So I guess something came up, but she was going to try to attend today. But she asked, well, what kind of things do we like to know? And I guess if you have any ideas on artificial intelligence you'd like to learn more about, just drop me a note. I'll let her know. But I'm thinking artificial intelligence. You hear so much about the power needs and the water needs, etc. I think that's obviously something that's very interesting to us. And if you got anything else, just help me out, and I'll pass that on. Stuart, go ahead.
You said April 28th. That's a Tuesday. You mean the
Oh, is it?
25th?
Okay, I just must have made a mistake there. Let me see. It would be the fourth Tuesday, fourth. So I just took the wrong date. April 25th. Yeah, it'll be April 25th. I'm sorry. So save the date, please. And Schyler, once again, it was great. Really, it's really great. I love birds, and I really, when I really began to love them even more was during COVID. We didn't have, you can't go anywhere, and so we spent so many hours in the backyard just watching our birds and bird feeders, and it was that kind of helped us get through COVID. Um, so wonderful presentation. We appreciate you joining us today, and everybody have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much. Thanks, all of you. Have a great one.
Thank you, Schyler.